Let's begin by giving thanks to the Lord our God and to the Lord Jesus for this time of fellowship that He makes possible for us through this very frustrating technologies at times. That mind you, when things don't work like the way they're supposed to. But regardless, we are still grateful and thankful that this has been available to us. This is actually this whole subject of technology and what we have available to us these days is somewhat related to the topic that I wanted to talk about today, which essentially is a topic about prosperity. When I first came to believe in Jesus Christ back in the early 80s, I had some affiliation with some of these places called the Word of Faith churches, etc., like with Kenneth Hagin, Kenneth Copeland, and such people. And, they always talked about prosperity. But of course, later on, I came to understand that, that's the biblical prosperity and this worldly prosperity are not necessarily quite the same thing. Okay. However, it is the truth that even worldly prosperity, which literally means an increase in goods, is also something that God gives to man. Okay. So in the end, all good things come from him. However, they arrive here, everything, God is involved in everything. So the point of this talking about this is that there is, in my opinion, a direct correlation that, before God's severe judgment only falls upon people and history that we read about, people that God had sent a great deal of prosperity to. Okay, and they had in turn, when prosperity came, which we read, which we will see time after time after time in the Bible, there are many, many, many examples. People did not turn to God and give thanks. As a matter of fact, they turned away from Him and they increased in their evil lusts and in their abominations that they pursued, rather than being righteous and holy, which is why God had sent them, so that through their prosperities which He had blessed them with, they could in turn be a blessing to others. But it turned out to be quite the opposite in most cases. Even people like Solomon, who was probably the wealthiest man that ever lived, he himself was not somebody who humbled himself as a result of that prosperity, but he himself eventually was the cause of the splitting up of Israel into two countries of Israel and Judah, and in the end, the destruction of both. So that's the subject here. And what led me to think about this is that this is something which I have in the back of my mind. I've thought about this from time to time, but I haven't really put it together. But what, as I was, just even this in these last few days, I began to think about it, just about the increase in not just the level of technology that we use today, but in just the sheer number of goods that we have. I remember those of you who are a little older, grew up in the 70s and 80s, and we remember those days, and even in the 90s, we didn't have the type of abundance that exists almost everywhere in the world today. Yes, there are many people that are poor and destitute still, and always will be, but still, generally speaking, like the number of goods such as automobiles, airplanes, TVs, computers, whatever you name it, it has increased exponentially. Okay. And which is how worldly prosperity is measured, that it is an increase in the number of goods, or the amount of goods that exist in the world that are available to the people. So, if you recall correctly, if you remember back in the day, back in the 80s, for example, every house had like one little 20-inch or, TV, right? And that's basically it, and not like we have today, where, there's like 65-inch TVs in every room and such things. There's like 6 cars parked in the driveway. It's not how it used to be. And, we didn't used to have like 40 pairs of shoes and things like that. Life was quite different and not that long ago, but it has changed dramatically. But it is not just in rich countries like in the USA and Canada and places like, but even like being here in India, you can see that there is the sheer amount of goods that are available even to people here, like in everybody's walking around with a cell phone, whereas in the old days when I was growing up back in the 70s here, you would see most people would have at most like a little bicycle that they used to use for transportation. Now, at the very least, they have these scooters and motorcycles, and the number of cars back in those days, if you only the very wealthy even had a car. Now, like there's so many here that, you can hardly find a place for parking. So this has all happened in the past 50, 60 years, but especially since the Second World War, the world has become more prosperous. Okay. So to me, I began to put this together that, the coming judgment, there is a correlation to this. And the way it has happened is that the world's money supply has increased dramatically. Okay, this is the only way all these factories could be built, like in China, for example, that all these goods could be manufactured. And then, the prices drop so much that, maybe they can be shipped to almost every country in the world. Now, there's no place on the earth where they don't have things like smartphones and even like, computers or tablets and things like that. They exist everywhere. And that was only possible through money, okay, the increase of money. And that led me to think that, what? The Bible does tell us that love of money is the root of all evil. That as evil grows in this world, which is the only reason why God is going to judge the whole world, is that the whole world has to increase in its evil. It means that the money has to grow as well, because the love of money is the root of all evil. So that tree, for it to grow, the more money there is, the higher and bigger that tree of evil becomes. And that is related to what has happened in the world, especially since the Second World War. And I'm not really going to go into, these are the kind of things that, I have in my life been introduced to, for however it happened. I have come to understand a few things about central banking, about how money is created. And, now I can see that, all that had to happen because it gives me a better understanding of, how God is always gives man an opportunity that, God is always in blessing man. Okay. But the more he blesses him, the more evil man becomes. And in the earthly sense, those blessings come through earthly goods, whether it's an abundance of food, even the sheer food products that are available to man today, especially, you guys who are in the Western world in particular, you can go to the grocery stores and you'll see these treasures of the earth from all over the world that come in there. You see fruits from like distant parts of the world, whatever, some sauces, all kinds of food products coming from everywhere. And, again, like when I said, when I was growing up, even as a child 50 years ago, 50, say these, we didn't have that much like we do today. So this has all happened for a reason, that, before God judges this world, because what he has prophesied to happen in like Matthew in 24, for example, and in the book of Revelation, which we have been studying lately once again, he's not just going to destroy it without the evil in it being so great that he cannot withhold himself from sending judgment any longer. And that increase in evil is directly related to the increase in money that has been created by, institutions such as these central banks, especially the U.S. Federal Reserve, and which has made it possible, like, to build all those factories in China. They were not built by the Chinese. Yes, the Chinese laborers might have been working to build it, but the money that built it, it came mostly out of the USA. And that is something we are going to learn now. Is, they did a series on this year in the past about how and why USA is at this time anyhow is Babylon. I mean, in a way, the whole world is Babylon. Babylon is the system of money and commerce, which is what the purpose of life is considered to be by most people. But in that system, the head, you could say, in the present time is the USA. And as judgment comes, God is going to judge the money system. Okay, that's what's happening in our world today. Like, something I've been thinking is, about this judgment. We've been talking about this for a very long time. We've been expecting many things to happen, like even like from 2020 onwards, for example. And, you think about it, like, why doesn't it happen quicker and faster? Okay. And that is something which I am beginning now to see and understand, is that these judgments are related to the system. This is something I came to understand, like, 10, 12 years ago, is that unless this system of money and finance and economics and bankings, it is not destroyed, the world itself cannot come to an end. So that is the system that God is now, it is under attack. And what is happening is, in order to defend that system, Satan is literally fighting for his life through this monetary system. Okay, because he knows once that goes down, his time is short. He is headed for the lake of fire. So he is not a fool, as man is a fool. So he is definitely doing everything to fight it, to keep it in place. And this is the reason why every time I thought, going back to the early 2000s, when, I first came to begin to understand these things in the late 90s and early 2000s, and, we had the dot-com bubble and other things, other crises, 9/11, etc. And, at that time I expected, the system to go down, but it didn't. Then we had the great financial crisis, what's called, in the 2007, 8, 9. And again, I thought, man, this is it. And it didn't. And then again, through the mid 2010s, whatever, they had again this war thing going on in Ukraine and Syria, and this and that was happening worldwide. And, again, you think, okay, this might be it, but it didn't. And finally in 2020, again, like this year is when that happened, we thought, surely this is it. This is the end of the world economy, but it has not so far happened. As a matter of fact, the opposite happened after 2020, where, suddenly people felt that they were richer than ever before, especially in Western countries, particularly in the United States, because, the government just handed out money like it was candy to everybody, and everybody had this, what's called the wealth effect. And they started thinking, they were all like Donald Trump or somebody. And they were spending money like drunken sailors, buying things, and the economy started booming and everything else. And now I understand, yes, that the order from on high to pull the plug has been given, but it is not going to happen without a fight. Okay. And this fight of this battle that is being fought, everybody on these prophecy guys, they teach you about, there's going to be a war in the Middle East and all that. Yes, all these wars and everything are going to come, but they are going to come because that tree of evil, which is based upon money, is something that is what keeps Satan's main power. And he knows that once that goes down, he will go down. So, this is what the power, that is why these things have not happened yet. But this is also a sign of something else we learned through it, which is that this is a sign. This is not just a sign, it is the evidence of God's long suffering towards man. Okay. God could have everything, he could order Satan, okay, you go today and you pull the plug, shut down all the banking systems. It's been done before, like in the 1930s, like they just shut down all the banks, everything. Lots of people's monies and deposits disappeared. Their gold was taken away. All that has happened before. It's not that it cannot be done. And it's not that it is not going to be done. It is going to be done, and it is going to happen. Okay, it is going to happen. But before it happens, God always gives many warnings. And even through the 1920s or even before then, I'm sure, God was giving warning to people who were paying heed that these things are happening in this world. It is turning more into evil. And, there's going to be a great, especially in the US, it was, that's where the brunt of it was felt, although that depression was felt around the world. That's what God must have given warnings in that time too. So he is giving man these warnings now through what we had, said in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, then the great financial crisis, and all through the 2010s, and then particularly with this so-called pandemic and what happened, that should have been a great wake-up warning for man to humble himself before the Lord God and turn to him. But man has not. People have used all the money that was just handed out to them to go and spend it on themselves, to live the high life, so to speak, go out to these ball games that cost ungodly sums of money, and go to bars, whatever, holidays, you name it, buy cars, this, that, but they did not turn to the Lord their God. So God, when he sends judgment, it is almost always a pattern which we see, going back to the days of Noah, with the world the way it was. We understand that, which we will get into it here. Jesus himself taught us that, they were eating and they were drinking and they were partying, then having a jolly good time. So obviously, it was a prosperous world that existed back then. And that prosperity, again, instead of making them humble and making them, turn towards God and to give thanks to him, they turned to evil and increased in their hatred and violence towards each other, killing each other. Then the same pattern again, we see in Sodom and Gomorrah, for example. I talked about Sodom and Gomorrah in one of my videos, one of my teachings just not that long ago, that, everybody thinks that the sins of Sodom was mere, sexual perversion, but that's not what the Bible teaches. It says that it had an abundance of bread and idleness. Their bellies were full and they had a lot of free time. I think that's kind of the condition we see, especially in the Western world, where people are full and fat and they have a lot of time. And, as that expression goes, an idle mind is the devil's playground or something like that. Then they turn to devilish activities. That is why the world, not only as this prosperity has grown, what else has happened in it? It's become more abominable. Much more so in the past, as this money supply has increased dramatically, so have the abominations and the sicknesses of this world. In the past 10 years alone, or even 5-7 years, all the things that are now accepted as normal in society, I don't even want to name them. It would have been shocking even like 15 years ago. Nobody would even have talked about it. And, people don't think that there's any kind of correlation with money, but there is, totally. Because it is the love of money, and the more money that comes, the more evil grows. And that's what we have been witnessing. And that's what's been happening. And God has allowed it to happen. He has given man more than any time in history before. There are more goods in this world today. There's more food in this world today. There's more of everything in this world today than has ever existed. Okay. And there's so much money and wealth here that, literally nobody should even be poor or hungry or naked or whatever. It should be, but it is the greed of people that, hoard, like the top 1%, as they say. They control 50% of the wealth or whatever. So it is not distributed. But God has given more than enough. And therefore, this is now the time when man should have been more thankful than any other time in history. The opposite has happened. The opposite has happened, that man has become more and more depraved and sicker and more abominable, and what is going to follow is going to be more violence towards each other. Okay, so this is something. Let me just begin here. I'll do a little, I wrote a little notes on this topic here, which I think is worth exploring in much greater detail. This relationship of the growth of money and the growth of evil in this world. Okay, where is it? Here we go. All right, so this is what I have written so far, okay? That the Bible is full of examples of nations and peoples that enjoyed earthly prosperity for a period of time. Prosperity that was sent by God. And I'm going to go into Deuteronomy chapter 8, which is a great chapter on where money and prosperity comes from, okay? Most people that are rich give themselves the credit, but they don't understand that whether it's a king who is given power to go conquer great nations, such as the king of Assyria, about whom we read in Isaiah, or it is somebody who has been given a lot of money, everything comes from God. It is God who makes it possible, and then he waits and sees. Then he looks upon the person or the nation, and he sees what they are going to do with it. The Bible is full of examples of nations and peoples that enjoyed earthly prosperity for a period of time, prosperity that was set by God, but who turned away from him, thinking that their prosperity was a result of their own skills and prowess rather than a blessing from God. And now I want to clarify here that, we understand that, in this group anyways, we don't consider prosperity to be worldly goods, okay? But here what we are talking about is that in the Bible, one of the meanings of prosperity is worldly goods, okay? But God tells us that he is that one who gives us everything that, for our bodily needs and beyond. It comes from him. Okay, but in this time here, we don't lay up treasures upon earth, so we don't value that type of prosperity. Our prosperity that we seek is the prosperity of the soul and of the spirit. Okay, we seek the knowledge of God. We seek to be prosperous in understanding him. That's what we seek. But what this topic is related to prophecy, it relates to the end of the world, and therefore it relates to money, which buys worldly goods. And that's why this prosperity that we're talking about in this study, it relates to worldly prosperity, not to heavenly spiritual prosperity. So, prosperity was always sent by God, but people who were prosperous and rich, as, for example, the nation of Israel, they turned away from him, thinking that their prosperity was a result of their own skill and prowess rather than a blessing from God. They turned to wickedness and evil, and their ensuing ungodliness led to the judgment of God descending upon them, descended upon the whole world in some cases, and upon individual nations and peoples in even more cases. The pattern is quite clear. God sends prosperity because of his love for man. And as a result, people are given or have more than enough wealth, at least for a few generations. Not only does God send enough to satisfy their bodily needs, at least for a few but sends much more money and wealth that should have been used to bless others as God had blessed them. Now, I do want to also add here that money, in the sense that we use the word today, meaning like paper money, dollars, digital, money, etc., that is really not what money actually is. In the Bible, wealth is generally equated with something, that is tangible, like gold and silver. Whereas our world has so far progressed, it has become so evil that, what we are using and what people think of as money is not even money. Yet they're chasing after it. Yet they're living and dying and killing for it. Okay, that is how convoluted and perverted our world has now become, where we don't even know what money is, and yet people are running around chasing something that they don't even understand. Okay. Not only does God send enough to satisfy their bodily needs, but sends much more money and wealth that should have been used to bless others as God had blessed them. But as a rule, whether it was an individual person such as King Solomon, or the rich man in Luke chapter 16, or a group of people such as in Babel and in Sodom, or even the whole world as in the days of Noah, people with excess of wealth and time always turn to ungodliness and evil, not to godliness or to righteousness and holiness. They did not turn to God and do good, but rather they were attracted to darkness and increased mightily in their evil deeds. Okay. And these evils are clearly written about in the Bible time after time after time. But if you notice the pattern, that it was always a people that were not a poor and destitute people, they were well-off people. They were usually powerful nations. Even like, as for example, in the Babylon, like we're talking about USA Babylon, but even in the Babylon of Nebuchadnezzar, when their judgment finally came, they had become so abominable and so blasphemous that they had no respect whatsoever for God or man. They were, they were committing sacrilege, drinking out of his holy cups and vessels, and partying and involved in every manner of debauchery. So they were not poor, they were having big feasts, they had money, they had time, and yet what did they turn to? They turned to evil, and they turned to do darkness and to commit abominations. And when the time for their judgment came, it came from within, because those Babylonians, they were destroyed from within. It was their traitors within their own midst that opened up the gates to the Persians, and who came in and killed that king on that very night when that handwriting was written on the wall, that he had been found wanting and his kingdom was taken away and given to the Medes and the Persians. That exactly is what is happening today to the Babylon today. The main arm of Babylon today, USA Babylon, it is being destroyed from within, okay? Because it has turned to evil and darkness. And not only does it do those things, it openly announces and proclaims them as good to the whole world. So the more prosperous and idle a society becomes, the more evil it becomes, even to the point of sacrificing innocent infants and children in horrific fires to their evil gods. These type of sacrifices, they still go on. Okay, maybe not like, maybe they do even in the ways they were done back in the days with Moloch and how they used to, burn infants in there. But today, like whether it's done through warfare or through, fighting and those kind of situations that are created, it does happen. Innocent lives are being destroyed all the time, and that is literally a sacrifice to evil. So over the 70 plus years since the end of the Second World War, the world has been more prosperous in goods than at any other time in history, at least in the history that is known to us. This prosperity is directly related to the increase of the world's money supply, primarily through an exponential increase in the number of dollars circulating worldwide that has built factories and mines and buildings and modern conveniences such as automobiles, household appliances, phones, computers, recreational products, whether electronic, like electronic games, video games and all that, or sports entertainment equipment. There is such an abundance of goods in this world that it can hardly be measured. And this also includes exotic food products that we never even know existed that are available, all in quantities which could not even have been possibly manufactured even 100 years ago, including food products that have never existed on such a scale ever in history. And this is, not to mention all these technologies we have, such as these computers. Even when I remembered, I'm old enough to remember the time when we even a little transistor radio was quite an exotic thing. Okay. And a telephone, etc. Those things were still not something that there was something of a novelty in my time anyways, let alone like televisions and such things. So, how much this world has changed and how these things have been made accessible to like the population at large, it truly is mind-boggling what has happened in the world. Okay. So what I forgot to add in here in the live show was that actually the most important increase that has come about as a result of increased money in the world is modern weaponry and army and the equipment that they have. Okay. So today, man has more destructive firepower than at any other point in history, which will become very, very essential in the fulfillment of the prophecies of the book of Revelation and in Matthew as these wars occur in the Bible. In Revelation 6:4, for example, we can read that to the rider on the red horse was given a mega or a great sword, which is the word mega, and sword represents war. So these warfare that is going to occur is going to be on a scale and fought with weaponry which could never have existed unless there had been like literally an unlimited supply of money, especially that has been spent upon building the U.S. war machine. This is happening in our time right before our eyes. And what we learned from the past is that worldly prosperity or even the illusion of prosperity. And let me say this here that, today we don't have real wealth. Like I said, in the old days, real wealth used to be, gold and silver, ownership of land, such things, that's what constituted real prosperity and wealth. Okay, today what we have is debt. That's why this whole system is so evil, because it's based on credit and debt. It is not based on actual wealth that people possess, a lot of gold and silver or such thing, that real money. They are given credit and debt. And they think that just because they couldn't go to the bank, and the bank can give them a loan for $200,000 or, $500,000 or something to buy a house or whatever other purpose that they might want to use it for. And the bank is very happy to do that, because that is the business of the banks, which is another total, related topic, but I don't want to get into it, is that we live in a debt-based system where the debt must constantly grow. And that is why, that is what I have seen and now have come to understand with my own eyes, that when I was a child, growing up right here in India, nobody had credit. Even if a person had to build a house, they had to go and save the money or, borrow from family or whatever to build it. They wouldn't go to a bank and the bank would give them a mortgage. These things were unheard of, especially in this part of the world, let alone credit card. Okay. Nobody had even seen what a credit card looked like. But now, if you come to India, all you see everywhere are these banks are advertising auto loans, clients loans, this loan, that loan, house loans, and people are up to their eyeballs in debt. Because what happened? Why did that happen? And ultimately, all these debts are one way or the other connected to the US dollar. Okay. It really is something which people don't understand, because those bankers that are sitting in New York, or they're sitting in Zurich or in London or whatever, controlling the whole system as the agents of Satan, they need to expand the debt. And when the Western world, the Americans, the Canadians, the Europeans, they kind of reach their limit where they could really not be given as much credit as these bankers needed to expand the system, they had to go look for other markets. And those markets were developed in China, in India, and pretty much all around the world, even in countries like in Africa, etc., which were literally like jungle 20 years ago. And now they are shining metropolis, or places like Dubai, which was like a camel town village not that long ago. And you go and see that it is all related to an increase in money supply, which literally is an increase in credit. So we live in a credit-based system where people are given credit, whether it's a corporation or it's a government or it's an individual, and they all think that, they are rich. But they're not rich, they're actually poor, because a debtor is a poor person. That's what the Bible teaches us. So that's what's happened here, okay? That this is happening. And what people perceive to be prosperity, or the illusion of prosperity. But nonetheless, however it has happened, it has increased the quantity of goods that exist in this world. That much is for sure. Okay, and it has made things accessible to people which should never have been otherwise, would never otherwise have been accessible to them, especially in poor countries like where I am, where, people shouldn't be driving around in fancy cars and all that kind of, automobiles, etc., and living, like those type of lives, which they are at this moment, because they really don't have the money. It is only because they have the debt and the credit right now. That's why. All right. So now let's continue. This is happening right in our time, right before our eyes. And what we learned from the past is that worldly prosperity, or even the illusion of prosperity, almost always leads to ever increasing ungodliness in individuals, in nations, and eventually in the whole world. This world has become united, has become one in pursuing evil, because of the proliferation worldwide of the blasphemously called almighty buck, or the king dollar. The money creation system is the real Babylon. And since the US dollar is the main world reserve currency, and if you don't understand what all that means, don't worry about it. But these are just some facts that I'm stating here. And since the US dollar is the main world reserve currency at about 65%, followed by the euro at around 20%, the main head of Babylon in this time is the USA, followed by NATO, Europe. So what has happened since 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement, which established the US dollar as the world reserve currency? The USA became the most prominent head of the Babylon system of money and commerce, and has so remained unto this time. Using the power of the dollar, the whore of Babylon has spread its filth of abominations through various means, such as through Hollywood, in order for the whole world to worship mammon, by chasing the so-called American dream, which is in fact a nightmare. To keep this short, it is suffice to say that whether a person is in India, or in China, or in the Congo, or in Argentina, or even in Muslim countries such as Iran or Saudi Arabia, the ideal life is perceived to be that promised by the American dream of riches and wealth, living a life of decadence and opulence. Seeking God or laying up treasures in heaven does not even enter the minds of most people, let alone actually working and laboring for spiritual profits in the life which is to come. Most people want their rewards here and now, and as the song goes, they live to get rich or die trying, even if they have to kill many others in the process. So, to me, the greatest evidence of coming God's judgment upon nations, especially upon Babylon, USA, and the world, is the unprecedented prosperity the world has experienced for the past 70 plus years, since the 1950s, but especially in the 2000s, and to an even greater extent since the 2010s. This was only possible through vastly increasing the world's money supply, which was the result of the wholly orchestrated so-called great financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, and on a much greater scale in 2020, following the so-called pandemic, which saw an increase in money supply as never before witnessed in history. However, I believe we are yet to see the money supply increase on an exponential level following these wars that are currently ongoing and other unforeseen events that are headed our way. Okay. So again, to understand this, what is going on, that this system is going down. There is no doubt about it. And one day it will completely shut down. And what that will mean, it literally will mean the end of the world as we know it, and everything, will go haywire, at least for a season, before things will be reestablished, okay, or some sort of order will be reestablished. They always talk about order out of chaos. So there is going to be a period of chaos that is going to come our way, okay? There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, the powers that be, and I'm talking about the evil powers, and I'm not talking about man, like man that runs the Federal Reserve or like JP Morgan Bank or something like that. No, not that kind of man, not those kind of powers. I'm talking about the principalities and powers that control the men and women that run those institutions. Okay. Those principalities and powers, they are well aware, whose head is Satan, they're well aware that if this system goes down, they go down. So therefore, they are going to try and keep the system alive as long as possible, even if it means sending you all like $1 million check each to go and spend. Okay, that's what the system is based upon, is an ever increasing amount of money in the system through debt, to the creation of debt, to the creation of credit. That is what the system is. And that will be, they will attempt to keep it alive as long as possible. And therefore, things are being done which nobody could have predicted. What has happened in the past 10, 15 years, especially following that 2008 incident where they started this whole process of quantitative easing and all these kind of things, which had never been done before. It was all done to keep the system going a bit longer. And God, of course, allows that to happen because God is merciful. He is long-suffering. He sees the evil that has been done with all this, what man has done. And he says, okay, man, yeah, I'm giving you this prosperity. I'm allowing you to have this money, but you can turn around and you can now go and help each other and make everybody's life better through this prosperity that I have brought you. And yet man is going to do the opposite. And therefore he is going to incur not just God's anger and his fury, he is going to incur God's wrath in the end. Okay. And all that is happening now is that as this system is destroyed, the present system of money and finance, it is going to be replaced by another system, which we know is going to be the Antichrist beast system. So you know what? Don't expect that to be happening tomorrow. It's going to take some time. And that is why our teaching, especially from last week, for example, that the tribulation or this time is not just going by like, as quickly as people always teach us within 7 years. And, that's why, like, myself, many times I had to, send expected events to move faster. But now God has given me the understanding that, yes, they are happening and they will continue to happen. But again, everything happens in God's timing. God has appointed a time for everything, and that time will come. So what we can do in this time, while we await these events, which are sure to come, and they are happening, is that we pray, we study, we fast, we turn to God, and we humble ourselves before him. Then he will show us, and he will lead us, he will guide us, he will be our guide even unto death. So, we are going to be safe. And that's what we can be thankful for. So let's continue here, okay? So these events are happening. Things are happening. The world as we know it is being destroyed through the destruction. The world literally means money. That's what it means, okay? Don't you hear the expression, money makes the world go around? There's truth in those sayings. So the money goes, the system goes, the world goes. At least it'll be not completely destroyed. The earth itself is not yet going to be completely gone. That's going to happen later on. But the first major stage is that seals judgments is going to involve a destruction of the financial monetary system, which is going to lead to some very big wars and much destruction and much chaos in this world. Something that, I can't tell you what it's going to be like. Okay, I really can't, because I don't even know what it's going to be like. All I know is that whatever is going to happen, it does not matter, because we trust in God. Whatever he wants to happen to us will happen. And in the end, all things will work together for good for us, because we love God. So just as God has allowed man's prosperity to increase greatly over a period of time, and look for man to turn this world into paradise through that increase in money and wealth that was sent his way. Yet what man has turned it into is a den of iniquity, as never before seen in history. That's why you have all these evil agendas that are going on, perversions like the kind which we can't even name that are happening in our world, and they are being accepted. They're not only being accepted, they are being glorified. They're not only being glorified, they're being legalized. They are being demanded. And therefore, what must follow? Therefore, God's judgment will descend upon the world, destroying more and more of man's world as God's anger upon man's evil turns to fury and finally to great wrath. Advancements in technology, especially in the 20th century, made possible the growth of money on a scale never before seen in history. This is a great sign that the judgment of God will fall upon the world in equal proportion to the growth in money supply. The subject of how money is created and the role that central banks, especially the U.S. Federal Reserve System, play in the creation of money is not understood by most people. However, there is a direct correlation to how worldly prosperity is measured in the amount of goods that exist in the world to the amount of money that is created literally out of nothing by the banking systems, both by central banks and by commercial banks in our world. Regardless of how it is done, prosperity, which is an increase in goods, or worldly prosperity, I should say, which is an increase in goods and leisure time, comes directly from God and not from man. Just as man has enjoyed the greatest prosperity in history, the judgment that is going to follow will also be the greatest the world has known, as written, I believe, in Proverbs 132, the prosperity of fools shall destroy them, and the world has become fools on a scale never before seen in history. All right, so I'm going to end this year. Tomorrow, we will talk about, we'll go into Deuteronomy chapter 8, talk about, how God sends wealth and where it comes from, that in the end, everything that happens, it is powered by God and serves the purposes of God. And then we look at some examples, of the judgments that came and the worlds that existed in the time when those judgments came. And we will see how they were all like prosperous. They were all like filled. Their bellies were full. They had time on their hands. And all they turned to was debauchery and abominable and blasphemous activities and evil, like, we are beginning to witness yet once again. And that is going to fill this world. And therefore, it is going to bring judgment. Those judgments that have been prophesied to come, they are directly related to the system of money and commerce, which is something that nobody ever teaches us. Therefore, it is, upon us to study and to learn for ourselves. Let us open this up here and let's have a little, discussion on this topic. And again, this is something which, let's say, putting the pieces together, that this is how it is. And because we really have not been taught anything true about prophecy or even about doctrine by the so-called church, we have to study together and learn together. So whoever has something to add, please unmute and go right ahead.
Hey, Brother Paul, brothers and sisters. Glad to be here. Good to see you all here. Thanks for this presentation, Brother Paul. It took me many, many years to figure out that credit was a nice way of saying debt slavery. And even after I figured that out, it still took me a long time to get out of that. Thankfully, I finally got away from all that. In Ezekiel 38, it doesn't really say what the first merchandising was, I don't think. So I'm just curious, your thoughts. Do you think the claim of land ownership started with the anointed cherub or maybe Lucifer?
The anointed cherub is credited, let's say, to no pun intended, but he's credited with beginning this practice of merchandising. Okay. We read about that in Ezekiel 28, 15, 16, I think, somewhere around there. And therefore, what is merchandising? Merchandising is selling God's creation in whatever form it is. Because ultimately, everything, all goods, all products, all land, whatever it is, the elements like water, etc. It's all created by God. It's all belongs to God. The cattle upon 1,000 hills belongs to God. So if somebody begins to, parcel these, as these bankers like to use these fancy words, tranche them or whatever, create them, package them nicely, and start selling them, then that is merchandising. So if the anointed cherub was merchandising, then yeah, he is the one that started this practice of taking God's creations, dividing it into pieces or whatever, and then selling it off in whatever they were selling in those days. I have no idea, what actually they were selling, but obviously there was something that was going on. Some sort of trading was taking place. And so it goes all the way back to him, because the root of evil is related to money, and money is expressed through merchant banking and through trading. Yeah, that's how money is employed. So if that the anointed cherub was doing that, then he created money, and he developed this system of banking, etc. Then they used those to do something. What they were doing, I don't know. See, as I have stated many times before, that in fantasy fiction and even in sci-fi, so-called, there is a great deal of history that is hidden. For example, in Star Wars, it was not about just these wars between wherever these places were for no reason. These wars, they actually began as trade wars. They had this, as you can see on the screen, this TF, that's a trade federation. So they had these trade guilds, they had these merchandising, they had this banking, and we're told the Star Wars, and you begin to watch the movie, says long, long ago. So they're telling us that these kind of things happened in history a long time ago, and that of course, I'm not placing any kind of value or truth in what we read in fiction or in Hollywood. But yes, that information has to come somewhere, and since it is confirmed by the Bible that this anointed cherub, he began this process of merchandising and of trading and buying and selling, and therefore, it is not surprising that we see the same theme playing out in what is called fiction. And of course, Lucifer and Satan and everybody has continued that practice ever since. But I think it goes right back to the anointed cherub, into whom, the love of money first entered in, because he is the father of money, in my opinion, and therefore this very root goes right down to him, not to Lucifer.
Thanks, Brother Paul. It's kind of what I figured, but since it didn't seem to be very specific on what was being sold, I just thought I'd ask you that. And the reason I was curious about the land ownership part is because I don't remember where I heard this, but land ownership is pretty big in the Bible. I know that part, but I'd heard that the land ownership, if you don't have that, you could never truly be free. So that's kind of where I was going with that. I was just thinking about that part.
That's an interesting topic, because back in the 60s, somebody came up with this term, the poverty line. Okay. So they related poverty to some sort of imaginary income, amount. But back before then, a wealthy person was one who was a landowner. Everybody else was poor. Okay, so yes, so land ownership is a very, very significant, at least in the worldly sense and biblically speaking. God talks a lot about, giving land. And that's what wealth is generally being equated to, somebody that owned land. So that again is one of the changes that have come about in our system today. Is being brought about is that people they think of them wealthy based on the amount of income, etc. they make, whereas they are literally renting. They are renters. Even if they have a house, they're paying a mortgage and they're renting from the bank. So they're not really owners, in any sense of the word, but they perceive themselves to be wealthy. But real wealth was always related to ownership of land. Anyhow, to answer Dana's question directly, whether land ownership implies freedom, yes, it certainly did in the Old Testament, but now in these times we are free in Jesus Christ, whether we own any land or have ownership in any material goods or not. So it's not anyway, it is not necessarily, maybe in worldly sense, ownership of property, etc., can be a symbol of wealth, but we are wealthy in the spirit, not in a worldly sense any longer.
When I used to be a homeowner,
Uh-huh.
that's when I used to own a house, that's when I came to the realization that I will never actually own it, even if I paid that mortgage off, because if I missed my property taxes, I'm no longer a homeowner. So I found that out pretty quick. Not that I missed them and they came and took it or anything. It's just you miss one payment, you get that letter pretty quick. That was a big eye opener for me way back when.
Yes, in this world, everything is deceit. Okay. So we have these illusions of ownership and rights and such things. And for the most part, they work in the sense that, like you said, nobody comes and takes it away. But there is an option for somebody who's the actual title holder of that property, for example, that like the bank, that can come, or the government, they can come and take it away from you. And that I think is actually going to happen. This whole system, what's happened in the last few years in particular with the ungodly rise in prices of houses, etc., and inflation and things, and people going into debt on a level that has never before been seen in history. It is all a trap for that very trap to be sprung one day when everything that people think they own is going to be taken away. Okay, which has happened. It happened in the Great Depression, for example, and something similar has now been, the similar trap has been set once again, but on a much bigger scale. And it is going to be one day the trap door is going to be shut.
Hey, brother Paul, how you,
Yeah, LJ, please. Yeah. Hi, how are you doing?
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, now I can hear you. So I'm glad to be back. Yeah, the whole money thing. Whenever I talk to people, Christians, most likely they don't really understand the literal root of all evil started with that anointed cherub, and and it started with that. That's how evil began, and then that's basically how evil is going to end when God destroys, his brings his judgment. When Babylon falls, that's basically the last thing that's going to be destroyed. And I just love the perfect symmetry of the Bible, and it's very poetic. And I like that how you brought that out in your previous videos.
Yes, you're absolutely right, LJ, that it is. Yeah, it begins with merchandising, as we read in Ezekiel 28, ends with merchandising in Revelation chapter 18. Perfect. Yeah, bookends. Yeah, the Bible is symmetrical. It's perfect because it's the word of God. That's why. And everything that God has done, one day we'll be able to see the whole picture. And, then the level of amazement we are going to be, then we will fully understand how awesome our God really is. So in that case, let's, wrap this up here today by, again, I'm thankful and grateful for all of you who take the time to join me in these meetings. And, some of these topics, they seem a little bit not directly linked to the word of God or to prophecy, but when we really think about them, they are very deeply and intricately connected, especially the topic of money. If the Bible tells us love of money is the root of all evil, then, evil cannot be destroyed or chopped off without the destruction of money. So the destruction of money, we understand, if we can understand a little bit about how money is created, the creation of money is a very, very secretive, something that is kept a major secret in this world. And even I can't say that I understand it because I don't think really anybody really fully understands what and how it's done. And there's a reason behind it because it is such a, that the system is rooted in evil, and ultimately the product that it creates is death and misery around the world. And that is what is going to bring upon itself and upon this world that loves money, is that as money is destroyed, the world is going to be destroyed. So thank you, Lord God, for this time that we have had today. And I pray that, you will bless us all with more and more revelation and understanding in your word, so that we have become established, rooted, and grounded, so that as the storms of this time increase in intensity, they are not going to blow us over, but we are going to be founded upon that rock, and we are going to sail through those rough seas, because you, O Lord Jesus, are our captain, and your ship can neither flounder nor can it ever sink, nor will you ever leave us nor forsake us. Thank you and amen. All right, friends, we'll continue with this topic tomorrow. I'm going to get into Deuteronomy chapter 8 as to, prosperity and every good thing coming from God, which he tells us. And then we'll look at some examples of judgment that befell in the past, because we can expect the same thing to happen in our time upon our world, but I believe on a much, much bigger scale. God bless you all.
You're a rich man, and you like what you got. You're a rich man, 'cause of things that you bought. You think you're happy about the things that you say. But you're not happy before the night after day. Have you ever stopped to take a little time to wonder just what you're going through? Have you ever put some money down and paying for the times when you're feeling blue? Bet you never had the feeling that you get from a love that is genuine. Bet you never had the feeling that I get from a loving that is mine. You're a rich man, you can make money talk. You got women every hour on the clock. You say you're happy with the things that you got. I got no money, but I tell you I've got all that I want. I can't begin to tell you, I just can't start to tell you about the love I have and what it means. I will go on my way and you will go on your way, and how can I show you, can I make you see?